So it was July 11th, 1955, and President Dwight D. Eisenhower signed H.R. 619, a bill that went through the House that added to our money this line, "In God We Trust." 1955, that's how long it has been by law that we have "In God We Trust" on our money. Now before that, there were certain coins that had "In God We Trust" on them, but it wasn't until then that it became a universal thing that on all of our coinage and all of our bills, it would say "In God We Trust." It became kind of the motto of the U.S. that it would be put on our money. And I've always found myself just fascinated with that relationship between God and money. How does Jesus feel about money? And it's always kind of been interesting to me that we've chosen. I love the idea that "In God We Trust" is a part of what we believe and who we are. But it just seems odd when we find it on money, because it does not seem like Jesus is a lover of money, right? I remember the story, and maybe you recall this one as well. It's actually told in several of the Gospels, but I'm looking at the one that is in Luke's Gospel. And this is what happens. A certain ruler asked Jesus, this is Luke chapter 18, beginning at verse 18, "Good teacher, what must I do to inherit eternal life?" Jesus said to him, "Why do you call me good? No one is good but God alone. You know the commandments. You shall not commit adultery. You shall not murder. You shall not steal. You shall not bear false witness. Honor your father and mother." The man replied, "I have kept all these since my youth." When Jesus heard this, he said to him, "There is still one thing lacking. Sell all that you own and distribute the money to the poor, and you will have treasure in heaven. Then come and follow me." But when the man heard this, he became sad, for he was very rich. Now, I'm sure you've heard that story before, and it's always used to this idea, I think a lot of times, is that Jesus really didn't like money, and that's really not the case. In fact, it's interesting when you look at that story, when Jesus says to the man, "You know the commandments." What's interesting is he doesn't begin with the very first commandment, which is, "You shall love the Lord your God. You shall have no other gods before me." That's the very first commandment. You shall have no other gods before me. In other words, you shall love the Lord your God. That should be your only God. And what happens oftentimes is that thing called money or wealth, the things that we earned, our possessions, those begin to take that place. And this is what was happening to that man. And so as I was thinking about this, and I think about the idea that Jesus skips over the very first commandment, what I realize is Jesus is trying to help this man see, while he's keeping all the other commandments, if he has not dealt with the fact that his money, his possessions, are so much more important to him than God, so much so that he can't let go of some of those things, he's never going to be able to know the fullness of what it means to worship God. In other words, he's trying to do all the commandments except probably the most important one, the very first one, keeping God as our only God. A lot of times I think people get upset with the church because, we talk about money and we need people to give us money. But, really the church can be in the same boat that this rich young ruler was, where we begin to see that it's the money that becomes more important to us than what we do in terms of the way we worship and the way we honor God with our whole being. Yes, it's true. Money does a lot of things in our world, and we need money in order to do ministry, and we need money to live and to have the houses that we live in and to have the cars that we drive and do the things that we want to do. But anytime we begin to put anything in that place of what is most important to us, then we begin to stumble and we begin to find ourselves just simply going through the motions of faith and not really recognizing what the whole point is of that faith. And that is to honor and love God and to be connected with God. So for this man, what Jesus was trying to show him was, look, you've done all these things so well, but until you begin to get in touch with what is the most important thing of your life, you're probably always going to question whether or not you are on the right path. And again, the same thing goes for the church. We can't be all about money. None of us can be all about money. None of us can be all about wealth. Trying to find ourselves in a place where we can make God number one and, in fact, trust in God alone. Until we can get to that place, it could be probably one of those things in our lives that keep us from becoming or living in the fullness of who God has called us to be. One of the stories, one of the Gospels says that when Jesus hears that man say that he's followed all the commandments, it says Jesus looked at him and he loved him. And he said, one thing you lack. See, Jesus does this because he knows he wants this man to experience the fullness of faith and the fullness of who God is in his life. But until he's able to move God into that place, he's not going to make it. Now, I always like to think that, yeah, that man went away sad, but somewhere along his life, he began to understand what Jesus was trying to teach him. I hope that's the case for him. I hope he was able to understand that, as I hope I'm able to understand that in my life. And I hope we all are able to understand that God alone has that one place in our life.